Hey, I'm Dukes on Twitch. If you want to support the channel and greensunzenith.com, you can find my Patreon, merch store, and singles store where you can buy singles through TCG Player or Card Hoarder in the video description. If you want to get in contact, you can also find all that info in the description below for things like donation deck lists or just wanting to reach out. Alright, let's get right into it. Hey, welcome back to Dukes on Twitch. Back today with an Abzan Maverick deck tech and discussion with Harry Hackett, aka Harry1232. Hey Harry, a big thank you for joining me for this. Are you looking forward to Eternal Weekend coming up?
Yep, for sure. Thanks for having me on. Definitely
Nice.
looking forward to Eternal Weekend.
Yeah, it is your first. We were just talking about it before, and you are going to take Maverick to the event.
Yep, I'll be on this list we're talking about, Abzan Fiend Artisan.
Very cool. I know that Mark is coming on as well, who of course you said is someone you watched stream to kind of get into Maverick, which is really cool. And I think as well, just cool to have like two different types of Maverick going at it at the moment. Is there a reason why you moved towards sort of Abzan as the archetype of your choice?
I think the synergies with Fiend Artisan are just really huge, especially since Bowmasters came out. It's just a hate bear that also gives you two bodies, so you'll have extra sack fodder for Fiend Artisan. It builds the curve really nicely. You can turn like a 1-drop into a Bowmasters, sack the Orc army, get a 3-drop. You still have a Bowmasters left in play to turn off their cantrips. It gives the deck a really nice engine. That's the main reason.
Yeah, it's really nice, especially to turn on like non-relevant creatures into relevant creatures. So something like Collector Ouphe into Orcish Bowmaster or something of that
Yeah,
nature. But Fiend has
for
been
sure.
really good. I feel like when it came out, people didn't really respect it, and then Newton picked it up in Elves, and then we started seeing it in Maverick. At the time, I thought it was similar to Birthing Pod, where you could only get a creature one CMC more than the creature you sacked. But it's really, really, really nice as a mana sink in that way that you get a questing beast or a grist or a palace jailer from just a mana dork, which is pretty sweet.
Yeah, definitely.
You've also been doing really well in challenges with Maverick, which you don't often see, which is really great. I think definitely shows your strength with the deck. Do you have do you have any thoughts when it comes to the challenges with Maverick and if it's any different to leagues?
It's definitely different than leagues. I was grinding challenges for a while. There's definitely a lot of Delver style strategies there. So I think my list is pretty tuned to beat Delver, which is a good spot I think to be in for Eternal Weekend because I think a lot of people will play Delver in paper. But it's definitely tuned to be like fair blue tempo strategies. And that's a pretty good recipe for success in a challenge, as opposed to like a league where you want more like combo hate.
Yeah, definitely. I think leagues are kind of where people are just going to try to jam some leagues back to back with combo, whereas challenges, you're probably going to get a bit more mid-rangey slash delver. Um, but yeah, the list looks really nice. I haven't tried out Legolas's quick reflexes yet, sadly, but I'm very much looking forward to after picking up my playset. Have you had any time with it so far?
I haven't been testing it too much. I want to say maybe I've got like 20, 25 games in with it. It's definitely a very powerful card. It can protect your creatures while they still have summoning sickness. So like against control, untapping with a Fiend Artisan is like game over a lot of the time. Um, That's very powerful. Also, it can be a removal spell, like if they have a Delver of Secrets, you have a Noble Hierarch, cast on your Noble Hierarch, kill their Delver. If you have a Knight, you can kill pretty much anything with it. You can get extra land too. Um, the problem is if you don't have any creature, it obviously doesn't do anything. So if you're on the back foot, it can be very awkward. I'm still testing it out. I don't know where it's going to end up, but I think it's definitely powerful enough to have at least one or two in the main deck.
Yeah, I remember when it was spoiled, a lot of people were like, this can't be right. Like a removal slash hexproof spell with split second, but also that it says it deals damage equal to its power to up to one target creature and not fight is just insane to me as well. That, you know, your knight could kill a Murktide, but the Murktide won't kill the knight. Yeah, I think.
And it gives reach too. It's so random. I didn't realize that for like the first 10 games I played with it. So if they swing with a flyer, you can give your knight reach, block the flyer, tap it, kill something else on their board that's attacking.
Yes, exactly. And the creature that you might have killed doesn't even give like combat damage to the knight that might, be killed off by the Delver as well. But yeah, insane. I think there'll be probably a few readers at Eternal Weekend. I know this card has got like a lot of media attention, but I think there'll still be some who don't really know that it's around, potentially.
Probably, yeah.
And it's a new card. I think some people will be caught out by it. There will be players who just don't respect it and go, "Oh, like you had that," or like, "What's this?" Which, yeah, I think is a little benefit, but it does have a lot of upside in a deck like Maverick because you do have a lot of creatures that not just tap but also tap for value. So things like Mum, Fiend Artisan, Knight, even small things. Sometimes your opponent goes to bolt the creature that they want to try to deal with and then have another removal spell for the bolt. This makes that disastrous. Yeah, it just seems like a really cool card that finally Maverick is kind of fits into Maverick. Maybe not as a full playset, but it seems like a good card to have in the deck.
Yeah, it has a lot of synergy with what we're trying to do.
Yeah. Are there any matchups that you typically don't want to see at an event like Eternal Weekend or in the challenges?
Doomsday is always tough. Sneak and Show, 80 card Death and Taxes can be rough. The deck, I'd say, is 50-50 in a lot of matchups, but those matchups are pretty rough.
Yeah, from my experience, that is definitely the same. Yeah, Doomsday. I feel like Doomsday players have definitely played with me before, where the pile is like two Underground Seas, two fetch lands, and then just Oracle, because they kind of know that they can just race me, which never feels great. One big change that I would say that's happened to Maverick over the past few months is the move away from Ramanap towards other ways of value. And Renegade Rallier, on paper, I was like, I really like Ramanap, but Renegade Rallier, getting back bears that you can't Green Suns for is really good on top of getting lands as well, especially the turn they come down as well, which is really nice. It can sometimes do a little bit more the turn it comes down compared to Ramanap. And yeah, I think the flexibility of it as well is a pretty big appeal.
Yeah, I put Rallier in a couple months ago. I was looking for like a against like scam. A lot of it usually comes down to like who drew more Bowmasters, and it was kind of like if I Fiend Artisan away an Orc army, I can get another Bowmasters back and ping their guy. It's just really good attrition there. And it's been great, not just there, but it does the Ramanap thing. You can bring back a Wasteland or another Fiend Artisan. I think it's definitely better than Excavator in the Fiend Artisan lists. Just being able to bring back a bear. I don't know if in like traditional Maverick you're gonna have enough ways to turn on Revolt, but with a Fiend Artisan to sack a creature, turn on Revolt, and then find it and bring something back, it's been very great in this list.
Yeah, I love that. Especially, yeah, getting rid of a Bowmaster, putting it in the bin to Fiend Artisan to go and get a Rallier to get back Orcish Bowmaster to come into play to ping something.
Yeah.
Yeah, really, really cool. And I think as well, it keeps up with the speed as well that some decks really need you to have. Like Initiative. I reckon Rallier would be probably a lot, yeah, have a lot more impact than, say, Ramanap, which takes a bit more setup against Initiative.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, did you move your mana base around in any way to accommodate what's called Revolt? Like with the full 8 fetch lands?
So I've always liked playing more fetch lands than some other lists. A lot of people play like 6 or 7. And maybe like 2 Bayou instead of 1. I find that you want 2 Savannah for sure, but like 1 Scrubland, 1 Bayou is usually enough as long as you keep it in mind when you're fetching that you don't have too many black sources. You don't want to run them out into wastelands. And then if you have more fetch lands, that just makes your mana easier from the start because you can fetch what you need. and that also has the added benefit of making Rallier better.
Yeah, that's a great point. Palace Jailer as well is a nice one. I've sometimes found that decks can go wide against Maverick and steal the crown, the monarch, against you, but in a deck with Bowmaster, Grist, like Fiend, Find, Bowmaster, quick reflexes now as well to have like a flash blocker in a way, it seems really nice.
Yeah, so the Palace Jailer, it's a one of. It's kind of like Grist. It's not perfect in every situation, but when they have like one creature out, it's insane. You get a body, you exile their creature, you draw an extra card for the rest of the game. If they have a bunch of creatures out, it's not great, but it only costs you one slot, and you can tutor it out with Fiend Artisan. And there's just so many games that it's just going to run away with by itself.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, I think it's still a card that not everyone expects it, which is I think even better because then they don't build their board out to beat it in a way. Um, and yeah, can literally still run away with the game, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
With the board, a lot of free spells, a lot of one mana spells, and then a pretty high count of creatures, which is really nice for a Maverick that's a creature deck. But you don't typically see as many, but I really like it. The one that kind of sticks out that I know Achilles is a big fan of is Hushbringer, which seems to do a lot of work against potentially Initiative or Death and Taxes or potentially Thassa's Oracle decks if you just want to have another hate bear for that. Are there any sort of matchups that you like this in that you might not think about at first glance?
Those are the main ones for sure. Um, it's mainly in there for initiative, but being a lock piece against Thassa's Oracle decks is really nice as well. It's great against Death and Taxes. We do play Bowmasters in our deck, so you really only want to bring it in against something that has a lot of ETB triggers or really important ones, because we have a couple in our main deck, so it's really for those matchups.
Nice. Teague, I think, has seen a bit of a resurgence, especially a lot of these sort of 4 color, 5 color lists that are running Leyline Binding, Terminus, maybe a Supreme Verdict, Prismatic Ending, Fourth Erlingus. Swords is typically the out, sometimes maybe dressed down, sometimes they're playing a Karakas. But it's nice to know that like Mum and Teague together are becoming somewhat of a better lock than they were maybe a year or two ago. He's kind of come back into the fold.
Yeah, Mom plus Teague is super hard for those decks to beat. And quick reflexes helps as well to protect Teague or Mom.
Yes. Yeah, that's very cool. Uh, yeah, other than that, pretty normal. I guess the only thing is that you don't have like Artifact or Enchantment Hate in the main deck outside of Collector Ouphe, but I assume there's not really too much to worry about game one that you can't get through.
Yeah, game one Collector Ouphe is usually good enough against the artifact decks. I like having the Outland Liberator in the main, but the list is really tight, and I wanted to get the quick reflexes in there, and that was just the easiest cut. It was that and the Thalia. And Thalia is great, but she doesn't have too much synergy with the deck. And there's enough combo hate in the board, in my opinion. And she dies to Bowmasters, which I really don't like.
Yeah, yeah, that's a tough one. Um, but I do really like at least acknowledging that and having other cards that do fit Thalia's mold in some regard. Because a lot of the time, Collector Ouphe or Galacti can do this similar things against like Storm or some of the like more control-ish decks of the format. But yeah, it's sad to see her seeing less play over time. Obviously, Mark hasn't played her for a while as well, being on punishing versions. Have you played much with Mark's version? I feel like you both played at an SCG with similar deck lists.
Yeah, so that was actually the weekend that Bowmasters came out. That was an interesting format because it was maybe a month after Iteration and White Plume got banned, and
Yes.
there were a lot of like 4 and 5 color Zenith decks with Ice Fang because Bowmasters hadn't come out yet to hate on those. And I was playing a more traditional Abzan build, like a tempo build, and I was having a really rough time against those decks, but I picked up Mark's deck, which is very good against those decks. You can Punishing Fire, all the Ice Fangs and Baleful Strixes, and then the Saga plan is really hard for them to beat. And I had similar matchups against a lot of the other decks, so I felt like that was a really good meta call. So I basically just copied Mark's deck list for that event and did really well with it. After that, when Bowmasters came out, that's really good against Sylvan Library, and it's really good with Fiend Artisan. So I switched this list, but I feel like for that short window of time, uh, deck was in a really good spot.
Yeah. Would you say, I know Mark had a question looking at sort of your deck and his deck at the moment. Are there any decks or any matchups where you think he might have a better time than Abzan at the moment?
I'm not sure on any specific matchups. The decks definitely do different things. He is more of like a value engine going on, so my deck's definitely faster, but in longer games, I would think his deck is definitely better. Plus, definitely better against like Death and Taxes, I'd say for sure. I know when I was playing Punishing Maverick, I'd say that felt favored, and it definitely feels unfavored with the Fiend version.
Yeah, D&T can be pretty tough, especially those like pretty consistent openings of Mama to Stoneforge into Cauldra. Culture's always really hard to just deal with permanently, especially with the amount of ways they have to reset it if you do deal with the germ.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember actually playing with Achilles last Green Sun Summit. We actually played against Mark, and we had a hand that had like Stoneforge Caldra, and it was next to impossible for Mark to deal with it. He had to get to a stage where you just had to chump block it and then try to win on the swing back. But yeah, just like a really, really hard card to deal with.
Yeah, Haywire Might is nice. The Saga decks to get rid of Cauldron now. That's a great tool that's come out.
Yes.
But it
Yeah.
is still very tricky.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. Uh, Endurance. Endurance is a card that I love. And at a stage, I was playing a full four, but I've definitely cut down on them just to kind of have different cards in the slot that do similar things, but might have a bit of crossover in other areas. Is that sort of where you are with Endurance? Like, it's obviously great against things like Delver or Graveyard Hate, or sometimes Control decks if you want a flash creature, but it's probably not a card you want
Yeah.
four versions of.
So endurance is great. So I'm running one main, one in the side. There's one main, but then there's 3 Fiend Artisans and 4 Green Sun Zenith, so you can get it pretty often when you need it. Um, and it is a 3-drop, which you don't really want too many of. The curse pretty high with 2 4-drops, and then you have all the 3-drops. So you have access to it main deck when you need it, and then out of the board you get another one. It's felt like enough for me.
Nice. Yeah, Mark also said, oh yeah, what do you think of Scavenging Ooze? A little bit too slow?
I've always been a Scoos hater. It's great in like long games against combo, which
Yep.
never happen. I
Yep,
mean, they
that's fair.
happen once in a blue moon, but I'd rather have something like Endurance or Leyline of the Void to just stop them immediately. And against like control decks, it can exile the Uro, which is great, but they're gonna have 4 Swords of Plowshares, 4 Prismatic Ending, and they can 1-for-1 your creature, which is terrible in that matchup because they have so many ways to get card advantage.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess on that, do you have any thoughts on Bajuka Bog in Abzan lists?
Um, Bazooka Bog, I think, is a card you want more ways to tutor up because it's kind of like Scavenging Ooze. It's very slow. Well, you have to get a knight on top with it and then activate it to exile something out of the graveyard. I think it's great in something like Depths where you have 4 Reclaimers, 4 Knight, 4 Crop Rotation. There's so many ways that you can tutor it out. But in Maverick with only 3 or 4 Knights, it's really slow.
Yeah. Nice. Uh, Kind of off topic, but where did the 1232 come from?
The 1, 2, 3, 2. when I made my Moto account like 10 years ago, I'm not very original at making usernames. So I typed in Harry. It was already taken. I threw some numbers at the end. It worked.
Nice. Okay, cool. I actually thought that might be the story, but I didn't want to assume. Um, nice. Ah, I think one good comparison that Clips brought up was Cradle Control, which has definitely started merging towards a more toolboxy deck that does have that natural order finish. Um, do you have any interest in Cradle Control? Have you ever played it?
Yeah, I've played it a couple times. It's a very similar deck. Um, it's definitely a more linear deck. It has more raw power to it. I think Maverick less linear, so it can deal with different situations better, but it also is going to have a slower clock. You can't just put a natural R in the stack and win.
Yeah.
Um, I think they're similar in power level. I think, if you don't know all the matchups, Cradle Control is going to be great. You just slam natural order. And I think if you know what you're doing with Cradle Control, it's an amazing deck too. Like Newton and other people have been doing very well with it. It's not really in my play style. It's kind of wants to do the same thing every single game, set up the same board state, get Reclaimer, find Cradle, find this, natural order. Maverick, you have so many different lines because we play so many one-ofs. Every game you can set up something different. They're very similar decks. I just prefer Maverick. I think it's cooler.
Yeah, nice. I agree. I think it's cooler. Um, both have pretty similar curves as well outside of the natural order package. Have you ever considered cutting 4 drops and just having like a 1, 2, 3 CMC deck?
There's only two of them in there right now, and I think the effect that they have is necessary. Palace Jailer, it's a hard removal spell off of Fiend Artisan. If you have one creature and a Fiend Artisan, you can't get Grist unless you sacrifice the Fiend Artisan as well to kill one creature, and then you don't have much at all left. But if you get a Palace Jailer, exile their creature, become the Monarch, you draw a card every turn, more than worth the one slot in my opinion. And then Questing Beast, it's a finisher. If they have a bunch of little creatures out and they're at low life total, you kill them. If they have the ring, it turns that off. If they have a Maze of Ith or a Glacial Chasm, it turns that off. It can kill planeswalkers. I think it's worth the one of inclusion. It's only 2 4 drops. And we have a lot of mana in our deck. 5 Dorks, Gaia's Cradle. So I don't want to have a ton of 4 drops in my deck, but I think those two are definitely worth it.
Nice. Yeah, that's really well put. I think that Questing Beast just allows you to pressure when your opponent might not want you to pressure, which is nice, especially those that put down a Planeswalker to think to like, okay, it's going to take a turn off the clock, whereas Beast just gets in and then deals with the Planeswalker on the side, which is always a great feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing better than like your opponent untapping and then just conceding because they just don't have an answer to Questing Beast with like like a bunch of like little creatures on board. That's always cool. Do you expect much D&T at Eternal Weekend as well?
I feel like there's a good amount of it in paper. I feel like I always see a couple people playing it. So I definitely want to keep that in mind for Eternal Weekend. Yeah.
I guess Initiative is the other big one that I think. I think if I think of like grinders who want to play Eternal Weekend and want to play Legacy, I think Initiative is probably a good deck. I would probably also look at like a black blue black scam as another kind of like deck that a lot of like maybe modern people could pick up and play. How do you find the Initiative matchup? So I kind of struggle with like keeping up with their ability just to 2 for 1 a lot of the time.
Yeah, it's a pretty tricky matchup. You want to be on the play. That's really important.
Yeah.
It's a lot harder on the draw, but if you have like a Noble Hierarch, and you have like a swords, hit their initiative creature, take the initiative, and then have something to protect it. It's a big ask, but that's kind of the plan. Um, Scryb Ranger is really good there at taking the initiative. It's really removal, evasive creature is what you want. Fable and Fourth can be tricky to play against. Solitude, Fury. They have a lot of tools against us. But they also mulligan down to like 4 or 5 a lot. So
Mm,
it's a mixed bag. It kind of it really it depends more on what they do than what we do. If they have the perfect 7, we're not going to beat it. If they mull to 4, they spit out an initiative creature on turn 1. You have a swords attack with a dork. You're
you're
gonna
good
get
to
it.
go. Yeah. Yeah, looking at your mana dorks, you actually have 5 exalted creatures, no Birds of Paradise, and I've definitely been someone who really loves exalted, especially against something like initiative with that example, or even like being on the draw against a Teferi deck. Sometimes like there have been times where I played a turn 2 knight off of birds, they've played a Teferi, bounced the knight, and then I haven't been able to attack the Teferi with bird, which is just like huge. It's just like those little things that snowball. And I think having those 5 mana dorks all with exalted is really nice. Very like you might not pick up on it, but then once you start playing with the deck and that happens a few times, you're like, oh, okay, that's actually like if this was bird, this would not happen, and I wouldn't have this chance.
Yeah, Exalted's huge. Like even if you flood out and you draw like 3 mana dorks or something, play them all out. You can attack for 3 with your mana dork.
Yeah, there's nothing better than like your opponent like bolting and like one of your 3 nobles or something just to keep it from attacking,
Yeah.
which is cool. I think one card that more people are coming around to is Once Upon a Time, which is card selection, not card advantage. And typically, I've been impressed with Once Upon a Time. Obviously, you don't want to have too much fluff in the deck, but I think like the 4 green suns and the 3 once is becoming pretty staple when it comes to like non-creature spells. Like even say these 10. Like I would say when it comes to Maverick, you think of like maybe the creature package of Green Suns and Fiend Artisan. You might think of like a lands package with Knight, but I guess it's 11. So I guess if you were making a Maverick deck, it's pretty hard not to like first pick up these 11 as like a kind of must have.
Yeah, I think Once Upon a Time is an auto include by now, at least for the tempo shells of the deck. Like it doesn't really fit in like Mark's deck, for example, but if your plan is to play Mana Dork into neither Reliquary and you have a bunch of hate bears, back that up. It's basically like a green ponder, I'd say. Because you get to look at the top 5, get a land, get a creature, sets your hand up really nicely. You know, if you have like a 1, 2, 3 curve, but you only have 1 land, but if you have Once Upon a Time, it'll find that land. Or if you have a couple lands and a 2, 3, and a 4 drop, Once Upon a Time for a dork. It really ties it together.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Um, yeah, when it comes to sideboarding, do you have any like brush comments for matchups? Like I think with Delver, like Collector Ouphe is usually a very easy cut. Um, but
Yeah, so I take out like Collector Ouphe, Questing Beast. You don't really need those cards. Carpets come in, obviously. The Endurance. Um, Plague Engineer can be interesting depending on builds. Depending on builds, like naming Human kills Delver and Darcy before they get their abilities that make them bigger. Against like Rug Delver, it also hits the
Questing
Questing
Druid,
Druid's also a one human at base.
yeah. Do you have any thoughts on like Rug versus Grixis? I would say Grixis is a little bit more difficult because of Orcish just hitting a lot of your early mana acceleration, and Rug more just being
Yeah.
like allowing them to do more in a way. Like I wouldn't say Questing Druid is the biggest issue, but it is a way for them to get ahead on cards and get some like extra value.
Yeah, I'd much rather play against Rug than Grixis with Bowmasters. Bowmasters has been like really brutal in the tempo matchups. It's been a great tool against tempo matchups, but them being able to turn 2, play a Bowmasters, kill a dork, set me back a turn, and then they have 2 bodies they can attack and block with is really really powerful for them.
Yeah, 100%. Um, I think Quick Reflexes is pretty sweet against Delver. Because there are times where you have a great cover of the board on the ground, but not the air. And you do have Scryb Ranger, you do have Endurance, but sometimes they just have like 2 DRCs that are turned on or 2 Delvers, and You just know, like, you're at a factor of 3 in your life total. But quick reflexes giving you reach and also potentially dealing with another one of their threats is pretty huge. And split second, I should say.
Yeah, I think quick reflexes is good there, but it can be awkward as well, especially if you're on the draw. Like if you play a land, a Noble Hierarch, you have 3 mana for a night, they can daze it, they can force it. If they don't let you stick a creature, your quick reflexes isn't going to do anything.
Yeah, it's a great point. They're a great deck at keeping you off threats, so quick reflexes could just be a bit of a dead draw off the top. Just never feels great. What about the 5-color bean decks? Because that's value, and I've been having a bit of trouble with those without kind of not allowing them to get ahead too much.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. Game 1, you want to be mindful of like Terminus. Try to stick a Fiend Artisan if you can. Like Mom into Fiend Artisan is a pretty great strategy against them. And then out of the board, Gaddock is huge. Force of Vigor can clean up the beans and the leyline bindings. And then you have like Carpet for mana, Thoughtseize to kind of disrupt them as well.
Yeah. And not too many threats. Like typically, I feel like if they're not on a Yorion build, it's 4th and potentially Uro. But outside of that, there's no real pressure. Maybe do they play Solitude? Sometimes. Yes.
Yeah, sometimes Solitude, yeah.
Okay.
It's like Solitude, 4th Earlingus, Uro.
Okay. Do you ever cut down on Swords Plowshares against those decks?
Yeah, I usually go to 1 or 2. It's good against Uro. You already have Alice Jailer and Grist to deal with creatures. Then you have Endurance to keep him off Uro as well. So there's not a high count of creatures, and swords will often be a dead card in your hands. You don't really want too many of them.
Yeah, that's very true. Nice. Yeah, do you have anything else that we haven't gone over?
I don't
Any
think
tips
so.
for players picking up the deck?
Fiend Artisan is the best creature in the deck by far. If you untap with that and you have a creature, your chances of winning the game are going to go way up. Like, it just lets you play any card in your deck for the rest of the game, basically.
Yeah,
So I
it's
value that very highly.
yeah. Are there many Orcish Bowmaster decks where you don't play it out before a creature's in the bin, just so it can't be hit by a Bowmaster? Or does it really depend on, like, you're just wanting to jam threats? I would say
You
it's quite
definitely want
hard
to
for an average
be
player.
mindful of Bowmasters.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely is context dependent, but if you can play around it, I would try to.
Yeah. Nice. I'm actually writing an article at the moment on the blue-black scam matchup. How do you typically find it? And this is kind of the one with, like, say, sometimes Murktide and Grief, the Troll, and Bowmaster.
I think it's the trickiest of all the tempo decks right now, except for maybe Rhinos, just because they have a really good way to grind with like Sauron
Yeah,
to
that card's very
reanimate and
good.
like Grief and such. It's hard to keep up with. I think it usually comes down to top decks. Again, if you can stick a Fiend Artisan, that's going to be really hard for them to deal with, but they have a lot of ways to remove it. And they can also put a really fast clock out with like a reanimate on a troll or a Murktide, so it can be tricky for sure.
Yeah, the Troll's tough, especially because usually if you do get 3 creatures on the board, the first set of 3 creatures aren't going to total up to 5 or 6 power, whatever it is. So you're probably just chumping with all 3 if you are in that position.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, that thing is very hard to block.
yes. Yeah. And I was kind of writing it out and saying they're kind of like protect the queen in a way. I find with a lot of the early starts where they're like end step, troll, untap, reanimate, they might try to protect that instead of building out. But there are a lot of matchups or a lot of matches against it where they actually do go pretty wide with threats. Like they obviously have the Orc. They can just on turn 4 hardcast Grief. Not as protect the queen as I thought they are, but They do have that kind of built
Yeah,
in with like
definitely
Thoughtseize or Delves and Force.
definitely less so than like Delver, because they can just hard cast Grief, take a card out of your hand. Late game, their animates are going to be great. Get back a Grief, that's another 2-for-1. Get back a Bowmasters, that's another 2-for-1. Sauron's Ransom, fill up their hand, fetch up Mystic Sanctuary, do it again, start looting with Ring ability. That can be very grindy.
Yeah, even like Thoughtseize you, then reanimate your stuff. I always get that. That gives me the ick sometimes when they like reanimate your Grist. That always feels the worst.
Oh, that's terrible. It's
Yeah,
terrible.
really hard to get under. Um, but yeah, nice. This has been really cool. Um, a big thank you for coming on and sharing your thoughts. Good luck at Eternal Weekend. We'll hopefully see you on camera. Do you have any shout outs anywhere someone can find you? I know you're quite active in the Discord, which is great.
Pretty active on Discord, yeah. I have a Twitter account. Sometimes I'll post if I do well in a challenge, but I'm not very active there. Mainly on the Maverick Discord.
Nice. Well, Harry, a huge thank you again. It's been really cool watching you and your performances grow. I know that Maverick over the years has had like Dan Neely doing well, and then Achilles taking on Abzan, and now you and Mark, of course, just like getting some really nice finishes. It's really cool to see because I feel like for some reason Maverick just isn't as respected as it should be, especially with the tools it has these days. It might just need something like a nice Eternal Weekend finish to get that little bit of respect. So no pressure, of course, no pressure. Take every game as it comes, but yeah, I'm sure naturally we'll see some good results.
Hopefully, yeah. Thanks for having me on, dude.
You're welcome. Yeah, we will be back this weekend with Mark, which is cool. And then also between then, Michael Mapson with a Naya Depths deck tech. So that should be pretty cool as well. Because I assume Depths will be at Eternal Weekend and some Force as well. Yeah. All right. Thank you again, and I'll catch you next time.